Welcome to Health, Wealth, and Happiness, a fast-paced, informative, hour-long program dealing with physical, emotional, and mental health issues, consumer information, and money management, as well as the arts, theater, travel, entertainment, social, and civic events. Brought to you by the University of South Carolina School of Medicine Specialty Clinics, the Institute for Partnerships to Eliminate Health Disparities, the Newberry Opera House, the South Carolina Philharmonic, supplements manufacturer A.J. Lanigan, Leon Jones Insurance, and the Mitchell House and Gardens. And now, here's the host of Health, Wealth, and Happiness, Gary Posick.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Health, Wealth, and Happiness. Now, here's a rundown of today's program. My first guest is Rusty Bracey. Rusty Bracey is the owner of ScoreNavigator.com. And I don't know if you saw over the weekend or not, but there was a very interesting report done by 60 Minutes on the whole scheme of things with regard to the credit scores done by the three major credit companies. And basically, it is a mess. It's guesstimated that some 40 million people have problems with their credit reports. In other words, there are errors in their credit reports, and they can't get them fixed. And strange as this may seem, the three major credit bureaus that put out these reports would rather be sued and pay big money, millions of dollars, to those who are successful in their lawsuits against them than they would be to fix the problems. That's the honest-to-God truth. That's the bottom line of what 60 Minutes found out. Well, Rusty has been in the business for over 20 years with ScoreNavigator. That ain't the way he operates, and we'll be talking with him on how you can navigate through the credit score maze of problems and be successful and be assured that you can get that loan for your house or car, that it's not going to affect your employment, that you're not going to be responsible for somebody else's debt on your credit score. Happens every day, and boy, it is a bear to get rid of. From 1:30 to 1:45 each Wednesday, Don Schaefer is my guest. He's a travel expert, and he just came off a cruise on the latest Carnival's glorious new cruise liner. And he's here to talk about their attempt to improve their image because it's been really shattered the last 18 months. My final guest of the day will be Carrie Phillips. Carrie is with the Historic Columbia Foundation, and she'll be here to talk about Scarecrows in the Garden contest, which will start the 1st of September. So I hope you'll stay tuned for the entire program, and welcome back as he is here the fourth Wednesday of every month, Rusty Bracey. Good to have you here. Rusty, what I said was, the 60 Minutes did a really scathing report of the three major credit score sites, and basically these three sites or these three bureaus, quite frankly, it is just almost impossible to get errors off your credit report, to the point that some 20% of the bureaus have scores and have information on your credit report that causes such major problems. You can't get a loan, you can't get a car loan, or can't get refinancing on your home, or it affects your employment. One of the things that I thought was very interesting, they followed a woman, a professional, a nurse in Cleveland, Ohio, who had for over 4 years been fighting with one of the major credit bureaus to get information off of her credit report with somebody who had the same first name but a different last name. Somebody, and somehow that information of that person got on her credit report. And as a result of that, it did affect her credit. And she had a stack, I'm not lying, of information. She had tried through attorneys. She had tried through her own sources for over 4 years to get this corrected. And that stack of information was over 2 inches thick. She finally sued him for an undisclosed amount of money. But you could tell on the smile on her face, it was probably well over $1 million. But the fact of the matter is, what CBS finally came up with in saying in the report is, the credit bureaus would rather pay for those few people who are successful and stick with it long enough to sue them and get a settlement. They'd rather pay the settlement than fix the problem. What in the world what a way to do business.
I know when I saw that, I was astonished, because to me that doesn't make sense. And this goes back to like even an earlier interview that you and I did with the identity theft problem that was happening in South Carolina, on the cost of these agencies to put in special security systems to prevent those things from happening. People try to weigh off the cost versus what you should really do. And where I see a lot of this problem is, when they said there's 40 million people that have issues with their credit profiles, everybody does. And you and I have spoke about that too. There's not one credit report that contains complete accuracy all the way through it. So if you're dealing with 40 million consumers that they're bringing up, and if you go even on an average of five accounts, you're talking over 200 million pieces of credit data that has to be managed on a day-to-day basis. And the way that the credit bureaus get their sources of information is, one, they'll do a sweep over all the public record information across the United States. That's how they gather that. Because remember, the credit bureaus do not make any money from your local courthouses for reporting judgments or liens or bankruptcies. They provide that information because the report is not designed to allow you to get credit. It's to warn the creditor why they shouldn't give you credit. It's going to tell them things that would prevent you. And that's where that credit scoring algorithm and stuff falls into play now. It wasn't used, 20 years ago. So with that in mind, the information they gather from the courthouses are absolutely not correct. There's so many different names, especially small towns, a lot of relatives, a lot of things that get interchanged, and then social numbers get interchanged. Even when you go out and you apply for credit, Gary, somebody may put part of your number in there, but click a 4 instead of a 3, and then all of a sudden that may tie you into somebody else that may be in your zip code area or somewhere else, and then all of a sudden those things are falling onto your credit profile. And I think that had a lot to do with that lady who had been going back and forth for 4 years, and another lady that I saw in the lawsuit where she got over $18 million out of Oregon. And so there's so many suits that are going on because of the way the data is going in and being issued back to the people that are pulling our credit.
Now, we have talked about this before, but I want to reiterate what this report also talked about. I told you that this woman was like a bulldog. Once she got into it, she would not let go. She wouldn't take no for an answer. She was bound and determined she was going to make the credit bureaus get it right, which they never did. But here's what happens. About midway through this whole process, she gets a clean bill of health letter from one of the credit bureaus that she was dealing with. And they said, you're clear. Everything is fine. No problem. Your credit is fine. So she goes to reapply for a lower interest rate on her mortgage. And once again, she is turned down by her bank. And she's got the letter from the credit bureau Rusty, that says, no, Nancy, no, everything's been cleared up. You're okay. You're fine. And she hands them the letter. And the loan officer that she's dealing with said, Nancy, I don't know how to say this. I don't want to call you a liar, but this ain't the information we're getting from that same credit bureau. And she said, well, can I see the file? No, that's confidential. You can't see the file. Well, she went ballistic. And the guy, I think, felt sorry for her. He left the file open and walked out of the room. So she had the opportunity, just she in his office with the file, and the file is open on his desk. She had the opportunity to read the information that the bank was sent from the same credit bureau that sent her the letter, said everything's fine and dandy. Wasn't the same information. Now, we've talked about that before, but I wanted, what in the world is this all about? So when you think you're getting a straight scoop from these, all the time, I get these things in the mail, my email, from the 3 credit bureaus saying, you're entitled to us once a year, giving you a free credit report. You do is apply for it. Of course, there's usually a catch. They're really trying to sell you something. But even if I got it, that ain't what's being sent out to my creditors. What in the world are we playing here? A shell game?
Well, you may think that. What the difference is the data that's being reported again. So when you go out and you get the reports from the freecreditscore.coms, FICO.coms, and those type of places, you're getting a promotional type report. I mean, it does have your data, but it's not always the same information as what a mortgage company would pull, because there are other factors involved on those reports when it comes to them issuing that type of loan. And so the reports are promotional, even the annual credit reports. When I tell people to go to those type of sites, like the real actual free ones, that's just to see what you have on there. Don't buy the credit score. The credit score is a waste of time and money. What you're looking for on those reports at annualcreditreports.com is you're looking to see if there are accounts that are on there that do not belong to you, or if there are accounts that you have that are in a positive manner that are not being reported, and so you can take those steps. Now, one of the things that I wanted to bring up, Gary, and I try not to do so much about the company and stuff. This is supposed to be information that you and I are sharing on to the public so they can understand their credit better. But one of the things that were mentioned into the news story was that all of the companies that you go to are all owned by either Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion. ScoreNavigator.com is not owned by any of those credit bureaus. It's a completely independent company. Now, we do market the TransUnion credit report, and the reason why we did that, when we looked at the different agencies, we've seen in our experience, in my 30-some-odd years in the credit industry, that the TransUnion report, number one, had the least amount of mistakes on a credit file, and number two, they have a service that provides a better update process to correct those problems. So we have that report and their trans risk score, but that's not what it's about. What it's about is that we're able to put in our proprietary software that these credit bureaus don't have. And we've talked about that, the point deduction technology, where it analyzes the credit report and it actually assigns a number from 0 to 100 plus on both the positive and the negative items. Our report also shows them where most of those errors are going to occur on a report. It highlights it, where they're not going to get that from those other sites. And then we have the simulators that are in there, the target score simulator, where you put a score you're trying to reach, and you click a button, and it tells you, these are the steps, this is what it's going to cost you, this is how many points you can get. We added the money simulator in there, so if they're working with a certain amount of dollars, and they go, here, I want to put, $800 into my credit now, where's the best place to put it? It will show you that and how many points you can recover. But one of the things that we haven't mentioned before a lot is the manual simulator. And the manual simulator, because it is manual, that means you got to actually put more effort into it. But we designed that to show people what happens if you pay on a particular account that's an older account, even though you want to do the right thing, how many points you will actually lose where it's going to drop your score by doing that. That's the only simulator that's out there that provides that information. And the manual simulation will let you know that if you miss a payment or if you do something wrong, how many points you'll lose. So we encourage them to always continue to do the right thing. But I just wanted the public to know, and the listeners, that ScoreNavigator.com is not owned by any of the three major credit bureaus.
Rusty, let's go back to the example of the nurse in Cleveland, Ohio. She went to the point of getting one of the things that was on a credit report was a $600 veterinary medicine bill for a pet. Well, she got a letter from the vet saying, this ain't the lady. I don't know who this person is. Her credit card is different from the credit card that was used for this debt. Her pet is not a patient of mine. I don't know who this woman is. This is the woman who incurred the debt. She does live in Utah. This person clearly lives in Cleveland, Ohio. I don't know this person. She does not owe me any money. She sent that letter to the credit bureau. They ignored it. It didn't make any difference to them. They ignored it. Now, here's the deal. Here's my question to you. If you were dealing with Nancy, how could you have helped her get rid of this nonsense that she went through for 3 years?
By us interceding, we have a sister company called Credit DNA that handles those issues for the consumers. So if Nancy, when she first saw on her credit report, or we saw on her report, a particular account, and she said, Rusty, that's absolutely not mine, we would go back to the original source, speak to them, and then once we got a letter from that company, then we're supplied with the three bureaus, different fax numbers, and they usually, Gary, they usually change every week, and then we're able to fax that information over to the bureaus, get confirmation from it, and I'll be honest, they usually take care of that issue within 48 to 72 hours, and they just get it deleted off the credit report.
One of the things that the CBS 60-minute report talked about was that the people who look at the complaints from a would-be customer who's saying, this isn't right. I got a problem here, and this, like in Nancy's case, this doesn't belong to me, and I want it removed, went to someplace in Chile, and the three people that they interviewed, all they do is they enter it into the computer that Nancy complained, but they can't, there's nothing they can do about it other than they make an entry that it was received in her account. But they can't judge it. They can't rule on it. They can't change it. They just enter it.
Well, that happens a lot in life, in a lot of other businesses, in a lot of different areas. What you're dealing with is, again, millions and millions and millions and millions of pieces of credit data. And so you have a regular human being on the other end that enters that information in. And so once that information's in, it's pretty solid to them, because they don't go back and look at every credit card transaction that you've done over X amount of time. They don't have that information. in front of them. And if they do, Gary, they don't have the personnel, the staff, with all the cutbacks on jobs, employment, to be able to say, whoa, wait a minute, Gary didn't really owe this money, so now we've gotten something back from the credit bureau asking us that, and we can say, no, he didn't owe this. And so then the credit bureau can make those changes. My suggestion is, if a company knows that they've got a whole bunch of bad data, that they're not reporting stuff, they're understaffed, they have an option, Gary. Section 611 of the Fair Credit Reporting Act entitles everybody an updated, accurate credit report. So the way the process works is if a consumer goes and they contact the credit bureau and they want to challenge the validity, the way something's being reported, then the credit bureau sends documentation to that creditor. Now, if that creditor knows that they really can't verify the wrong information, if they don't respond back to the credit bureau, then the law says it has to be deleted, purged from the system, and then it just disappears. So if you can't honestly say, Gary owes this money, he didn't pay, he didn't do this, and you can't prove that, then just don't respond back to the credit bureau. It gets deleted, and you move on, and it doesn't affect their life one way or another, and it lets you, the consumer, move forward. And the credit bureau doesn't care one way or the other.
Well, obviously the credit bureau doesn't care one way or the other, because Steve Croft, who did the interview, always identified himself that he was with 60 Minutes, that he was doing this report, and he tried to get a representative of the three credit bureaus to go on camera to talk with him. None of them would. None of them would even release a statement to CBS with regard to this report. And the bottom line was, CBS 60 Minutes came to the conclusion that the credit bureaus of those people who do stick with it long enough and who do hire an attorney and who are successful, and they're few and far between, quite frankly, to go through the court system and sue the credit bureaus and are successful in getting a reward, the credit bureaus would rather pay that reward, regardless of how much it is. You mentioned one of them for over $18 million. They'd rather pay it than change the system.
And that hurts them, even though they're billion-dollar corporations. That does hurt them. But anything that Steve would call and say to the credit bureaus, it's not like that's the first time they've heard it. They've heard this over the years. One of the biggest problems, Gary, is that the consumer doesn't have a lot of time to follow up and do things on their own and to stay on it like these other women were able to do for a period of time. They kind of give up, they get frustrated, or they go to these, 20,000 credit repair companies. And those credit repair companies are mailing in dispute letters that are not even showing or proving or challenging the way the items are being reported. They're doing it just to make a buck. And so these credit bureaus are being inundated with all of these letters. So now all of a sudden you or I have an issue, and we're halfway intelligent. Well, you're really intelligent. I'm part way intelligent. And I write this letter and I send it in. Well, the first thing that the credit bureau is going to look at, and they're going to say this came from a credit repair company. And because the majority of the disputes that come from credit repair companies are just made up garbage, you get put into a category. And so that's the excuse that they use why they don't go any further. But when they do go further, remember the creditor on the other side has an obligation at that point to respond within a reasonable period of time, which is generally around 30 to 45 days, about 22 business days. Well, they're getting in hundreds of thousands of these problem investigations, the creditor, and so they don't have the time to respond back. So isn't it easy for them to just on their end and their mind say, well, what we said is correct? that person's wrong, we're correct, we have the data here, they don't know what they're talking about, so it remains on that bureau. And then there's companies like Experian that after you challenge something a couple of times, over and over, and say, hey, look, this is still not right, then they just tell you, look, it's too bad. We looked into it twice. The creditor said, hey, it's yours, and it's done. The creditor needs to take the high road, Gary. They need to just not respond back if they're not 100% sure that that particular account is that way. And where the consumer's running into the problem, see, the 60 Minutes doesn't mention this, and people don't talk about it. It's the positive credit that has the most amount of impact on the credit score, and that's where most of those errors are. It's not just these collections or the judgments or people using your identity. It is your positive credit has more impact. There's more errors. There's more point deductions, and the creditors are not playing fair when it comes to reporting that data. They're not reporting high credits right. They're not reporting balances that are being paid on a timely manner. They're doing certain things to prevent that credit score from going up. Our system identifies that.
I know you can't speak for the banking industry, but I got to ask you, the banks are certainly aware of all of the problems that the credit bureaus have had and continue to have and will continue to have over the years. That being said, if I get a report, and I'm a loan officer at a bank, and I get a report from a credit bureau, it's not worth the paper it's written on, but I follow it as if it's the gospel. Now, what in the world is that all about?
Well, you have to do that. And, with our software identifying where most errors occur, I feel like the credit bureaus can put that into their software. I mean, they can talk with us about it. It's pretty simple. Right now, Gary, I've been approached in the last couple of weeks on analyzing credit data in 30 different countries because they have nothing in place where they can identify it because they want to be a good provider to the consumer and to the merchants on supplying them with corrected data so they can make the right decision on being able to offer loan money, products and stuff based on true stuff. But the credit bureaus, they're just a gatherer of information, and then they're selling it back out. Now it's still up to the creditor. The burden needs to be put back onto the creditor and say, look, the data's got to be right, or, again, take the high road and don't respond back. Let it get deleted, let it go away, and let them move forward. Or if it's on the positive credit, stop monkeying around with not putting the actual real high credit, the months reviewed, and the activity on that report, because those are the things that have the most impact on the score.
Well, I'll tell you what. After seeing that report, I honestly believe the smartest $20 anybody can spend is to spend $20 with your company and get the straight scoop as to what their actual credit score is and what data is out there on them. The same kind of stuff that's going to go to the bank, not one piece of information that you send them is going to be different from what's going to go to the bank. It's going to be the same information, and they only have to do it once. It's not like it's a monthly fee of $19.90. No, it's one time.
That's right. It's one time. Last week, I had the opportunity to travel up to New York, and I met with a lady by the name of Beth Johnston, who's head of an organization called the IWLA. It's the International Women's League Association. She looked at ScoreNavigator for the first time, and she came up with a slogan: prevent the no before you go. That people should go in and take a look at this before they go anywhere to apply credit, because it will highlight those errors, it will give you those recommendations, and it will give you the necessary tools in order to make sure that your data is going to be right, and how you can maximize that score before you go anywhere and let anybody touch your credit.
Well, how do you sign up for ScoreNavigator.com?
That's all they do. Go to ScoreNavigator.com. On the front of the site, it will give you information about point deduction technology, about credit reporting, what your rights are, and there's a button there that says sign up. You click it, you go through the steps, and it's $19.95. It's the best $19.95. Hey, look, if I didn't have to buy the actual bureau from the credit reporting agency, it would be free. So they could get that data and get that information. And we're hoping that once they get that information, Gary, that they will pass it on to family members. They'll teach their children. They'll do those things because the education in there is far greater, and the tools are more, they're better than the actual report in the score.
Rusty,
the education is what's important.
Rusty Brasty, I thank you so much for coming and sharing on health, wealth, and happiness.
Thanks, Gary. Have a good afternoon.
When credit scoring was introduced into the marketplace in the mid-'90s, who really knew the impact it would have on our lives today? The 3-digit number determines the rate of financing we get on our home and auto loans, insurance rates, and even employment. But do you know how your credit score is calculated, and is it accurate? Do you know what to do to raise your credit score or change errors in your credit report? ScoreNavigator.com at just $19.95 a month not only gives you the most accurate credit score in the industry, it will tell you how to increase your credit score. Listen to information about you and your credit on the fourth Wednesday of the month from 1 to 1:30 right here on Health.